So that's the third level they identify. The fourth, and what you might say then the best level, the ideal level to move on to, is where you have not only the internal interactivity, a good trust and working on common goals, etc., but where management also plays a very active role in supporting this, does listen to the opinions forwarded by the European Works Council, does take those alternatives that you might come up with into account, does support the organisation of technical committees, for instance. At some point in our European Works Council, we started creating these technical committees based on the discussion we had with management on early information, being involved at the appropriate time in the development of a project. And one of the ways that we tried to solve this with the support of management was we started to have technical committees, where we invited people even from outside the European Works Council, other workers' representatives who were specialized in the theme that we were discussing about. So it is possible to move to that level. But the arrow in the middle really goes in circles, because you might have evolved indeed to that level, but as I said on the first slide, all of a sudden something happens which changes profoundly the composition of the group, and you have to start all over again. The idea behind this is, it is possible, and it is certainly true that we see that European Works Councils can evolve through those stages, and if you've reached this stage already, I think you already have gone very, very far. So that's the idea behind it, that there is a possibility of evolving through those levels, and what the first thing that is required actually, I think, is indeed the internal coherence, that you all have the same perspective of what your European Works Council can and should do, and together move forward. How do you get there? Well, I could list you up again a long list of slides with different examples and ideas, etc. But I've tried to simplify things. I've tried to simplify things and come up with a central idea of what I call the 3 C's. 3 lines, central lines that I think, if you work on those 3 lines, that you have a good chance of being successful. In German, that would be the drei Ks, I think. The 3 C's. First C would be, in my opinion, the coherence, the first thing you need to work on. Before asking your management to come forward with more information, to be listened to have more meetings, etc., I think the first thing you need to work on is to make sure that you all stand behind the same idea, that you understand each other, that there is trust between the members. It's very difficult sometimes, even at national level. Again, we've talked about the systems of trade union organization. If you have different French trade unions on board, for instance, in your EWC, they usually don't even trust each other. Let go that they would trust somebody from Germany or from Poland or from Sweden or from the UK to represent them. Very often I see that where you have a multiplicity, diversity of trade unions, they all want to be also a member of the Select Committee of the European Works Council. Because just appointing one of them, they would not be sure about what that person is going to say. So that's certainly one of the prior elements to work upon, to build this trust, to know where you come from, to make sure that from heterogeneity, that we talked about yesterday, you move to some level of homogeneity. We have a common goal. Coherence, the first C. The second C, related to that, but continuously, through the whole life cycle of a European Works Council, will continue to be important, is to work on your communication lines. Communication is the oil that keeps the motor running. Bad communication, you may have plenty of EWCs, plenty of information. If you don't have a good working communication line in all possible directions, it will not work. So constant attention needs to be given to good communication, sharing of information, networking like we're doing here today. Getting information also from outside your own European Works Council, which can help you to organize your own situation. Open your mind to thinking European, rather than holding on to where we come from. First Austrian and then European. Have to try to inverse that in some way. Open your minds to other opinions, and also be willing to share the information you have at local level. You all have bits of information. If you lay everything together at European level, maybe you will get a better vision of what is really happening in your company. If you don't have that European mindset, you're a bit stuck in your national position, and again, the European Works Council will not be as efficient as it could be. Coherence, communication. Third C, I've called that the captain. That is not specifically one person. But what I mean with that is that you need some kind of structure. You need to clarify for everybody how your European Works Council works. It's not a hierarchy like in a company, but it's not a group of friends either. Something in between, I suppose. You need a good, clear organization that everybody knows how things work. Who decides and how you decide. It's more referring to a select committee than one particular person, but still also specific responsibilities for the chairman, for the secretary, anybody who's a member of the select committee who takes up a specific role. It's not a body where you can just always rely on, we will agree. It will not work that way. At some point you will have to make decisions, and you will always have people who disagree. Then it has to be clear, there have to be rules, clear internal rules, that everybody knows this is the way we decide. Some people will not be happy, but there is a democratic decision in our European Works Council. So you need those rules also to overcome the differences that you will always have. Coherence, communication, and a captain. A few more words about each of those elements. Now, working on the coherence, first advice that I would give you is don't expect that it will happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes constant work, I would say. Getting new people on board, again, you will have to make sure that they get integrated in the group, etc. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a few years even. Certainly if you only have one meeting per year, you don't have so much time to get to know each other. But take your time. It is worthwhile. Once you have created a level of trust, you can really move on. Open your mind. As I said, have a European mindset. You don't have to forget really where you come from, but you have to realize that not everybody thinks like you do. Not everybody has the same background. Other people have just as valuable ideas and expectations as yours. Maybe they are completely contradictory, opposed to what your ideas are, but they are also valuable. And please try to take them on board and understand why somebody thinks in different ways, expects different things. Kind of elements we talked about yesterday as well. Another element of opening your mind, and then that's more referring to the quality of information consultation, actually is, as I said, when you have bits and pieces of information at national level, it's also a change in mind of having an attitude of thinking immediately, could this be useful for my colleagues in other countries? You all have bits and pieces of information. Some countries you have important information rights, so you have a lot of information. In other countries they have nothing. If you keep everything to yourself, you will still be living on islands. And you might be surprised at some point that all of a sudden a big decision is taken at European level, but which actually was already starting at national level. Exchange the information you have, put the pieces of the puzzle together, and maybe then you will see the larger image. And you will have a possibility of being proactive, of confronting your central management with, hey, this is what we saw, which was happening and in Austria, and in Spain, and in Poland. What's happening? There's something European behind it. It's an international decision. You have to inform and consult us. That too is an element of trust building. It will show people in those countries that have less information that you're willing to share what you have with them. And they will trust you a bit more, step by step. Use what you have simply from the existing legal framework. I often ask people at the beginning of a European Works Council training, have you read your own agreement? Because people complain. Everybody complains. It doesn't work at the European Works Council. You don't have enough meetings, you don't have time for preparation, you don't have training, blah, 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 blah. And then I ask them, have you read your agreement? What do you have in your agreement? Very often, people haven't even read their own EWC agreement. And they have a number of things there which were agreed at some point in time by the workers' representatives and management. Management signed that. First thing you need to look at is make sure that what you put on paper you really get before you ask more. I had a French group, another French group, which doesn't exist anymore because they also merged into a bigger group, which a couple of years ago came to me and said, we don't get any training or anything, how can we get some training? And I looked into their agreement and they had a right to 5 days of training every year. 5 days of training every year for the official and deputy members. They didn't know they had that. From there on, they certainly stood on their rights and demanded to have those 5 days of training, and in 4 years' time I did 5 trainings for them. But the first question was, we don't get any training. Make use of the agreement that you have. And training exactly is one of those things where, one of those places where you can exchange in an informal way, build trust and understanding with each other. Same with the directive, just 2 elements out of the directive which could be helpful in overcoming those cultural differences, etc. Training I already mentioned. There is a right to training now in the directive, even if you don't have it in your agreement. There is a clear reference now in the directive that says you're allowed to have the necessary training without loss of wages, both for a special negotiating body and for the EWC. And I would say for the special negotiating body it's even more important, because that's where you really come together for the first time. Nobody has ever met the other persons before, doesn't know where they come from, doesn't have a clue about sometimes what a European Works Council can do, certainly not about how social relations are organized in another country. But there's a high level of lack of trust, of fear of what's going to happen, and very huge conflicts of ideas about where to go to. Training is a major source of building trust, creating some common level of understanding at least. So training obviously is a very important element. But also, another element which is emphasized now in the new directive, in the recast directive, is that you're allowed to have, management must provide you with all necessary means, all means required to apply the rights stemming from the directive. Communication tools, time, training again, one part where management has to provide necessary resources, etc. Mobility, the possibility to visit local sites, etc. Because you represent all of the workforce, you have to be able to communicate, referring to the communication lines again, with everybody in the company. Use those tools, look at what your rights are before you ask anything more. Internal debates are very important. If you don't have trainings where you can do that really on an informal basis, certainly use preparatory meetings. In some cases, there's also a possibility of having debriefing meetings. Use that time, not just to look at only the agenda that in many cases was set up, was decided by management, but for exchange between yourselves. One of the items that I always put as a fixed item on the agenda of any preparatory meeting was a tour de table, simply going around the table, listening to what's happening in your country. European Works Council is about transnational matters. Nothing can stop you from internally discussing also about local matters. It is a way of supporting each other also. If at some point in one country they are talking about health and safety conditions,